So here I am going to show you how to diagnose and repair a worn gearbox housing issue on the Audi A5 or A4. This is caused from the left driveshaft bearing when it rotates within the housing of the gearbox. Since the gearbox is made from aluminium and the bearing is made from a very hard metal, which is basically designed not to wear down, it wears down the gearbox housing where it sits. This usually results in a new gearbox. The reason most Audi garages will say this is because it is part of the main body of the gearbox. So there are 3 bolts holding this plate. This is what Audi calls the bearing block. Some would also call it a shit design because this is a common theme in these cars. This holds the bearing against the shell of the gearbox to stop it turning. This will be replaced with a different plate as this is damaged. Anyway, I have all the suspension removed because I am just replacing it all with new stuff. It makes for better viewing, but you may not have the room I have here. So you need to imagine the rotational torque of the car. If I accelerate hard, and the bearing, the driveshaft, will of course turn around and cause this scoring on the housing, but the wear is mostly facing the rear of the car. The problem here is that the hole is now an oval and the driveshaft needs to be exactly centered to not cause vibrations and damage the seals, internals in the gearbox. This will also put stress on the CV axles, so we can't just glue a new bearing in. Look, see how this is much more worn than that side? And look, see how there's a lip on here? This means we can't take accurate measurements off the facing surface. That's like taking financial advice from Beetlejuice. Okay, so here is what I gotta fix this issue. I bought this plate that is manufactured in Poland. It comes with a new bearing, a new improved plate, and 3 shims to take up the wear from the housing. This will cause the bearing to sit proud. It needs to sit proud 0.5 to 0.8 millimeters from the housing. These will be used accordingly. See this circular part that is recessed into the plate that faces the bearing? Remember this? Got this barren shell or sleeve, whichever you prefer to name it. You can search for hours finding a batch of 20 made cheaply from China or get one, which is milled perfectly in a UK-based transmission shop. I want the job done right, so there you have it. It may seem expensive for a slither of aluminium, but the reason we use this is to make sure that bearing sits in properly. Get your bearing press and put the plate on the correct way. Remember the recess side on the bearing? Don't rush this step and look like a retard that fucked it up trying to impress the bearing back off. Okay, then press it in straight. Put the clip on after. This job takes time, unfortunately. What I'm showing you here is just before I pressed it in. I used a set of vernier calipers to measure the difference in sides. I then used a Dremel tool with a fine sandpaper bit. I feel like the stone textured ones are far too coarse for this. This ensured I don't take off too much aluminium. Look how much play this had before I fixed it. The sleeve was a good idea here. I didn't film much of the sanding here, but I would mention that the wear on this car is much greater than others I have seen. This lip I managed to get flat and went back countlessly with the vernier calipers. Okay, so a little bit of JB weld later, and I seated the sleeve using a flat piece of wood to make sure it sits straight. I wouldn't be tempted to push it right to the back as the geometry of the housing is all fucked up from the bearing. Remember, we don't want it sitting squint. I then took some of the glue off the back so that the shims are sitting properly. I measured that 3 shims were just enough to get the 0.5 tolerance right. However, I would have preferred 4. While the wheel liners were off, I cleaned all the console's tarmac, which has left the surface of the potholes they don't fix. Another reason why I have the suspension out. Go figure. Anyway, this is a ledge for stuff to sit and rust the chassis of all these Audis. Okay, so new bearing is sat in. Remember to clean the splines and oil it a bit. Also, take off the black plastic cap located on the bottom of the bell housing when removing and inserting your shaft into the hole. It can droop down and bust the seal, that's what she said. Look, new control arms and struts. Thanks, Council, for not mending my roads. New lowering springs, because why not anyway? You are good to rock and roll. Yeehaw.